Modern Mustangs have changed a lot between the first Fox bodies in 1979 and the S550 that dropped in 2015. But there's one thing that all these cars had in common: an 8.8-inch rear end in the V8 models. When they're built right, an 8.8 can take a lot of punishment, but they do have their limits. Now, traditionally, the answer once you've reached those limits is a switch to a Ford 9-inch, but that's not the right answer to every question. I've got Moser's Jeff Anderson here today in the shop with me, and we're going to be talking about this M88 housing. Now, this joins their Dana 60 and GM 12-bolt style axle housings, and I want to know how this compares to a stock 8.8 as well as like a 9-inch replacement. Now, the 8.8 has got a lot of good things going for it, right?
Exactly.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of aftermarket support for the factory 8.8.
Without a doubt, the 8.8 probably has more aftermarket support than just about any other rear end manufactured. So there's a lot of stuff out there available for it. It's a simple solution.
And we're kind of seeing the same thing happen with the 8.8 that we saw happen with the 9-inch. I mean, they're disappearing out of junkyards.
They are disappearing, and for a unit that was developed and built in such amazing quantities, the fact that they have quickly disappeared from the scrap yards is making it really difficult for the average guy to replace that factory rear when it does break. Parasitic drag on an 8.8 is much less than it is on a 9-inch or a Dana 60, and that was one of the points that Ford used when they built the rear end, was to save gas for fuel economy. The old CAF standards come into play. But when it comes to the aftermarket, we don't care about that. You know, we're more interested in reliability with high horsepower and getting down the track safely.
No, but it's going to free up a little bit of horsepower compared to running the same power through a 9-inch or a Dana 60.
Absolutely. It's not huge numbers, but then again, for the guy that's not building a pro mod car or something just off the wall, this works perfect for the guy that's going to drive it down the street and take his wife out for dinner.
How are we making the M88 better than the stock 88?
So first and foremost, nodular casting processes. You know, the way we cast this piece, we're not looking to produce 150,000 of these a year, so we can take a little bit more time and use some of the tricks of the trade that have been developed over the last few years. Casting of nodular casting material, that process has refined itself. There's better grades of nodular steel you can use. And just the process of bringing all those components together in the casting box and the core box, you can just make a denser product that will handle more torque, more power, and it just lends itself well for this.
Since you're making your own casting, you had the opportunity to build in some design improvements over stock, right?
When you look at the OEM unit, you see where it was lacking, and we addressed those issues with this piece. Increased support for the main bearings, increased cooling for the lubrication of the pinion itself, and then just on the webbing itself on the external side, you'll notice that the webbing is enhanced and just made to handle a lot more power without increasing the overall weight of the unit itself.
Okay, now let's talk drawbacks though to the 8.8. First of all, obviously spline count is going to be an issue. The
factory units were mostly produced in 28 or 31 spline, and they were developed with a C-clip axle as retention, which, as we know, is not race legal in a lot of the aftermarket sports. So there was limitations on spline count on the axles from the factories. And then you also had issues with the tubes rotating in the castings from the factory when you started stepping up the power levels. Those were all parts that could be fixed and addressed, but this is just a much simpler solution.
Now with the stock center section, if you want to go to a bigger tube, you're kind of giving up some strength there, aren't you?
Exactly. To insert a larger tube diameter in a factory 8.8, you have to bore the casting out a little bit. We've basically designed the casting around accepting a 3-inch OD tube, so you don't have to line bore a stock casting to get the bigger tube in there, which weakens the wall of the casting. This was designed specifically for that purpose. So the tube is also going to help with flex of the housing itself, which anytime you get flex in the housing, you're affecting the alignment of the axle bearings with the carrier bearings. It creates drag in and of itself and can sometimes lead to catastrophic failure.
Okay, that's something you really don't want happening at the drag strip for sure. Now speaking of the drag strip, clearly this is going to be great for straight line applications, but what other applications do you see people putting these in?
This is basically designed to be a mid-level step up for the guy that is breaking his factory 8.8, has surpassed the power levels that the factory 8.8 can handle, but doesn't want to make the full commitment to a 9-inch build or a fabricated rear for his car. He still wants to maintain the streetability. This one here has the ABS options on it. I mean, he wants to maintain some of that factory OEM setup to work with his factory suspension or his aftermarket suspension. It's just kind of a mid-level step.
So if I've got a nice suspension, big brakes and that sort of thing, I can just pull that off of my stock axle and transfer it directly over, right?
Absolutely.
I don't have to rebuy all that stuff over again.
Of course.
So that'll save you a little bit of money if that's the route that you're going to go with that. What would be like a max effort setup for this particular axle?
For the 8.8 with our M88 unit, basically the maximum drag application you're going to see in this is going to be a 35 spline axle with a spool combination, and then like an axle setup like our Moser Engineering Pro Flange setup. So that would take you to the maximum capabilities of the 8.8 ring gear before you would have to look at stepping up to a Ford 9-inch.
Nice. So let's say I want a different width on this. Because these are being custom made, is that going to cost me more money?
Not at all. Moser Engineering built their company around the fact that we do custom for no extra charge. So if you wanted a different width than factory, we don't charge extra for that. Everything's built to order from the time you place the order.
Well, Jeff, I want to thank you for coming here and showing me the M88. It's really cool that this is joining the lineup so that guys besides just Mopar and GM have all the customizable high-strength options for this.
Absolutely.
I'm going to try and figure out what project car we're going to put this in, so you can just go now.
How am I going to explain this to Mr. Moser?
Don't worry about it. We got to go.